No one can escape the climate crisis. It will, whether we choose to accept it or not, affect every single one of us. But climate change and its impacts are anything but equal. In fact, the cruel reality is that those who are the least responsible are already suffering the consequences. But how has this injustice come about? And how do we address it so that as climate change continues to worsen, we all stand a chance of weathering the storm? The world is a pretty overwhelming place right now.
It's a global pandemic.
Increased social inequality.
Political polarization.
And that ever-present thorn in our side, climate change.
Climate change.
By extreme weather.
Sea levels are rising.
Biodiversity is reportedly declining.
Have left the world in a climate emergency.
In this series, we'll explore how we got here, where we're headed, and what we can do to make a difference. This is The Breakdown.
Hello and welcome to The Body Shop in St James's Quarter, Edinburgh, Scotland. All eyes are on COP26 and Natura & Co has brought together an expert panel to share their insights on an important theme of the conference. Today we are joined by guests from across the globe to discuss what action we can take to eradicate the inequality girls and women face in the fight against climate change. The climate justice movement shines a light on the inequalities disadvantaged populations face when it comes to the social, economic and public health impacts of climate change, an inequality that has been compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic. And while the climate crisis impacts us all, its effects will be greatest on the world's most vulnerable populations, especially women and girls. The United Nations Development Programme estimates that 80% of people displaced by climate change are women. As climate disasters become more frequent, they will be at increased risk of homelessness, poverty, gender-based violence and disease. Our panel will explore the challenges we face when addressing this inequality and will also highlight what can be done to ensure more women are at the front and centre of formal climate leadership solutions. So let's meet our panellists. Dialing in this morning from Amsterdam, Ellen Windemuth is the founder and CEO of the Water Bear Network, the new free streaming platform dedicated to the future of our planet. Earlier, we saw a sneak peek at The Breakdown, a new 5-part series made by Water Bear which addressed all aspects of the climate crisis. No stranger to powerful filmmaking, Ellen executive produced My Octopus Teacher, which won, as many of you watching will know, this year's BAFTA and Oscar for Best Featured Documentary. Welcome, Ellen, from Amsterdam. Thanks for joining us today.
Lovely to be here.
We're also joined right here in the Body Shop in Edinburgh. Next to me is Jessica Omakutu, Research Fellow at Oxford Net Zero. Jessica leads ONZ's research on how net zero can be more inclusive for the Global South. She's worked with international finance institutions such as the Green Climate Fund and international NGOs in sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you for joining us today, Jessica.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be here.
Okay. And finally, dialing in all the way from India, we have Shifrah Jacobs. Shifrah is Chief Impact Officer at Plastics for Change. Her role includes overseeing the business's social and environmental practices. Before taking on the executive role with Plastics for Change, she worked with leading organisations in India, including the UNDP. We're delighted you could join us today, Shifrah.
Pleasure to be here, Chris. Thank you.
Wonderful. So look, let's jump in. A question, if I can start with Ellen. Ellen, Water Bear recently launched a powerful new documentary called Youth Unstoppable, following the rise of the global youth climate movement from its very beginnings. Thinking about young women, both in developed and underdeveloped nations, how do you think their attitudes have changed as a result of campaigning by activists like Slater and Greta Thunberg?
I think that's a great question. I think these young women have been joined by many more who are beginning to play major roles. There's Ridhima Pandey from India, and there are a number of really what I would call rising stars who are really bringing up an entire movement, not just of young women, but of teenagers, school children, millennials, to speak to authority. That has not really been a given in the past. These young women speak to authority. They have the understanding that there may not be an adult in the room in these very, very high up places at government level. And I think they have really effectively taught that to the entire youth movement. And it's a very inclusive movement. So their purpose really is to bring everybody with them who currently doesn't have a seat around the negotiating table. That includes minorities, it includes the global south, it includes the people that are working on biodiversity. So it's incredibly important. And we at Water Bear are working very hard with character-driven stories that handle this. One additional thing is we're coming up now with a series called Europe's Biggest Lie. And Europe's Biggest Lie is about air pollution. It's about that sort of sneaky brother of climate change that nobody talks about because you can't see it or feel it. And there's a wonderful woman, the mother of Ella Kissy Deborah, who died in London from the effects of air pollution. And her mother, Roz, fought for 7 years to get Ella's cause of death be registered as air pollution. So there are some incredible people out there, incredible women out there, and we're looking to make films about all of them.
Great. And that's exactly, I think, to your point, what the world needs. The world needs these stories. The world needs to hear these stories. And the way Water Bear, and I saw a film last night. The way Water Bear tells it is astonishing. Exactly what the world needs. And I think I would agree. Something is happening with the youth movement, isn't it? And it's growing and growing, and we've seen that. I saw it for myself. I think, Jessica, we were talking about it earlier on the streets of Glasgow right now. So I think that something is moving, and it's wonderful that Water Bear are telling those stories. So thank you. Thanks, Helen. Let me just move to a question for Jessica. Jessica, with an expansive career researching net zero, what, in your view, will it take to achieve a truly inclusive net zero future for those in the Southern Hemisphere?
Thank you, Chris. I mean, so net zero is a very hot topic at Glasgow at the moment, and at the center of net zero is reducing emissions by the second half of the century in alignment with the global goal for climate change, which is the Paris Agreement. But other than reducing emissions, an inclusive net zero is ensuring that those who have least responsibility for causing climate change, who are in the Southern Hemisphere, in the global South, have support to respond to the risks that will come with a 1.5 warming, a global warming. But also beyond the adaptation and resilience to these risks, they need to recognize that they will not be able to avoid some losses. And so mechanisms need to be in place to address the unavoidable losses and damages that climate change brings.
Yes. And tell me, we were talking a bit earlier about the role you feel young people can play in this fight, and you just mentioned the beautiful turn of phrase that the young people are not responsible for this, but it really is something that they feel strongly about and want to stand up to power. What are you seeing through your work, Jessica, that's giving you hope that we're seeing a bit, the voices of young people in the global South and the global North really standing up?
So the voices of young people are really increasing. We're seeing more young people make very specific demands for net zero. that are in alignment with their needs for the future, for a survival, for their rights. But then what we need is a more representation, greater representation for the youth from the global south, but also thinking about future generations from the global south. And so we need net zero strategies by businesses that are more aware of what a future generation from the global south will need and try to address those needs or anticipate them right now so that when we get there, we're better able to do that.
Great.
Yeah.
I think we'll come back to your comment about net zero businesses because I think it's a fantastic one. I think just before we do that, let's hear from Shifrah from Plastics for Change, an organisation, I mean, in the Body Shop here, an organisation that is close to the heart of I know the store staff here in Edinburgh and store staff all around the world are, blown away by the work that you guys do. Plastics for Change has an incredible impact on thousands of women in India, known as waste pickers. Not only are they tackling significant existing plastic problems, but through a partnership with the Body Shop, they now have access to more sanitary working conditions and a fair price for the plastics they collect. So Shifrah, let me ask you, first question, what are the climate-related issues the waste pickers face?
Thanks, Chris. We are seeing in real time some of the adverse effects of climate change in vulnerable communities. In communities like in India, as you will know, we don't have a complete and total waste management system. A lot of the plastic that comes from households gets collected in mountains of landfills, actually. And as you would know, the emissions, the toxic emissions from these landfills affects close to around 3% of the global greenhouse emissions overall. And in India, that percentage is a lot higher. So many of these waste collectors, they go into these really unhygienic environments, and to survive, pick up the plastic, anything that has value, actually. And in India alone, we have close to about 1.5 million waste collectors, and 60% of them are women. And unfortunately, a large percentage are children as well, who work with the families to collect this plastic. And what we see as a result of working in these very harsh conditions is that it has consequences on their health. And they struggle with respiratory issues, skin-related ailments. And because the conditions are so harsh, many of them even abuse substances to numb their senses. And this causes early death as well. We work with so many young women who unfortunately are widowed in their early 20s and have a family to look after as well. And one of the main issues that we're seeing now is because of the extended monsoon periods, a lot of the plastic that's left in the environments degrades very quickly. And because it's degraded, then it's not fit for recycling. And because it can't be recycled, then the waste pickers then lose out. And it's a loss of income for them as well. So really, these are some of the day-to-day issues that we're seeing in communities in India, at least.
Right, and clearly, the day-to-day challenges are tough. Thinking around the climate crisis, what strategies are there in place to ensure that they have a voice in tackling these longer-term impacts from the climate crisis in their communities?
We need more organizations like Plastics for Change, and indeed some of the other organizations like many of our panelists represent, to do our little bit, really. At Plastics for Change, we look at providing access to healthcare equipment, safety equipment, so waste pickers are able to take care of their personal health when they go into areas to pick up waste. We also give them access to good training and awareness, so they know the different risks that are associated with working in toxic environments, particularly. And one of the good projects that we've been able to do is we're building homes for homeless waste collectors, so they have access to clean water and hygienic living conditions. And we've been able to unify a lot of these informal collectors who don't really have a voice for themselves. and understanding their cares, their concerns, their struggles, and we're able to advocate for them on behalf of them with the local authorities and the municipalities. And the main thing really that that Plastics for Change at least is able to do is buy the plastic that they pick up from the environment, and we pick it up irrespective of its condition, and we're able to offer a fair and stable price for the collectors. And we're able to do that because of partnerships like we have with the Body Shop.
Yeah. And it's astonishing, isn't it, that we're in a store in Edinburgh, quite far away from you guys today in India, and bottles here are made using the plastic that the waste pickers have collected, and it's repurposed. And yeah, it's a story of globalization, but it's also, I think, a story of hope of how we can work together in partnership with business and tackle take steps towards tackling the climate crisis together. So it's really inspiring. I think just bringing this whole conversation together a little bit, we heard from Ellen about the astonishing storytelling on the Waterbear platform, which if you haven't watched, you've got to watch because it is inspiring stuff. We heard from Jessica about the importance of including young people in the journey to net zero, and Shifrah, stories around social justice. If we can try and bring that together and start thinking about business, what more beyond setting targets or for eradicating gender equality and pay equality, which is of course critical, as we've talked about, but progress is being made. Natura has already a series of targets that include defending human rights and being what we call humankind with each other. But within the Body Shop, we have a DNA. It contains a powerful campaigning spirit. I think it comes from the Body Shop's founder, the CEO and activist Dame Anita Roddick, who saw business having a real role and taking a platform for activism and driving social change, using our stores, using our channels around the world. So my question to all of you is, maybe Ellen, we could start with you. Is there a role for companies to be campaigners? And what can business do to advance climate justice, particularly around women? Ellen, over to you.
The answer is yes, absolutely. A company like Natura & Co. and The Body Shop is really an ecosystem of values in itself. And these companies are fantastic storytellers. They have very, very loyal customers and very many customers. So we've already done some wonderful collaboration with Natura & Co., where we as filmmakers simply add our storytelling skills to the brand's storytelling skills. And if you pair the brand's access to these wonderful customers with things like films and events and activations, and you twin them with NGOs like Shifrah's that are really active in the field, you have something very powerful. And we've had fantastic experiences with these kind of activations so far. We're doing a number of them now at COP26, and we hope that there will be many more. So my answer is a resounding yes.
And I think we're also hearing, aren't we, Ellen, that the importance of partnership, and that's a theme I think we've been talking about together, with NGO partners, with academics, with creative filmmakers. If we can all start working together on the same path, then astonishing things we hope can happen. And from the Body Shop, as an activist company, we really want to play a role in that as well.
A friend of mine says, nobody has ever been converted by a pie chart. So the exact process you just described, I think, is the answer to really accessing the hearts and minds of so many millions of people.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think it's true. And I think, when I think I was lucky, and we were talking earlier, Jessica, about I've worked in the Body Shop for a long time. I was lucky enough to work for the founder. And this is kind of before the time of the internet and, creative people like Waterbear. But she echoed what you said, Ellen. Storytelling gets to the people's hearts. It gets to people's souls. and the crisis that we face, I think today, it's never been important to engage people, particularly young people, particularly, as we've been talking about, particularly women. But Jessica, maybe I can come over to you just to build on that. Business, its role critically in reaching net zero, as you mentioned, is very important and something that we at Natura & Co take very seriously. But what about going beyond that? What's your thoughts on a business using its voice as a campaigning organisation to try and shift change?
Thanks, Chris. I mean, so first of all, businesses need to set net zero targets and work towards them. And beyond that, businesses can be more than campaigners. And so campaigning is a first step, but a second step is ensuring that net zero strategies are inclusive. And as I mentioned earlier, it's ensuring that people in the global south who are probably part of your customer base, but also beyond your customer base, are able to respond to the climate change risks as we move forward together towards the second half of the century. And so it's working with women and children and girls, but also the elderly and the disabled to ensure that they have the right skill set, the right capacity to anticipate, but also respond to future risks, climate change risks such as more intense droughts or storms or rainfall or droughts or floods that will come with a warming of 1.5 degrees. And so it's working with these groups to improve their livelihoods, to improve their access to education or healthcare. And a very important component of this is allocating finance to these groups. And so businesses can commit financing to addressing some of these issues in the global south.
And so it kind of comes back a little, I think, to what Shifrah was saying, doesn't it? The importance of those trading relationships as a business, ensuring that when you're working, you are building the philosophy of equality through your supply chains. And you're really saying, I think, as well, that net zero, to be net zero, which Natura & Co have committed to reach by 2030, is kind of table stakes. That's what a business has to do. What do you think about, in terms of going beyond that, using its voice in politics? Do you think business can have an impact on politics?
Businesses can work with people who are marginalized. In every space, in every decision-making space, there's always a group that is marginalized, and those groups are those that will be first affected when there is climate change. And so moving forward, businesses can identify or work with communities or countries to identify marginalized groups and work with them to understand why they're marginalized, but also why they're more likely to be affected by climate change.
Right, perfect. And then Shifrah, let's just quickly turn to you if we could. What's your views? Good business, going beyond net zero, seeking change as an activist? What's your perspective?
I echo what Ellen has said as well, that, businesses have such a critical part to play. These vulnerable communities share the ecosystem with businesses, and it's our responsibility to sort of engage with them actively. And we've learned so much from the Body Shop's philosophy of trade and not aid, and having a humanitarian approach to this environmental crisis is really a unique approach and much needed to continue supporting and building the communities. And I think businesses need to recognize that not everything is going to come tied up in a bow, nice and pretty, right? They have to recognize that there is a problem, and engaging with it means that it's going to be a process and a journey. So brands that are willing to get their hands dirty and willing to journey and use a lot of their best practices to engage with communities to help them is really the future of responding to some of the issues that particularly women, marginalized women, are facing because of climate-related issues.
Great. Okay. Thanks for the insight, Shifrah. Look, this is such an important topic. I wish we had more time to discuss. Unfortunately, we don't. So just to close up, a huge thank you to Ellen, to Shifrah, and to Jessica for their fascinating insights. I think the really good news, and I was just thinking as I was listening to you all, is the three of you are kind of part of the Natura & Co's and the Body Shop's universe. So we're talking now, but you're working with us in the future, which is also wonderful. And Jessica, we're looking forward to seeing you on Saturday during one of the Body Shop panels at COP. So that's brilliant. So thanks again for you all for making the time. If you would like those of you who are watching to learn more about what Natura & Co is doing at COP26, please visit naturaandco.com or follow us on our social media channels for updates. Join us again next Monday for another live event where our panel will be discussing why Amazonia is the way to our future.